She lives! No, that was not in fact a twisted Easter reference. That was instead just me crawling in, winded and dragging myself along by my fingernails. Because this is not a victory march, my friends, oh no. It's a cruel and it's a broken. This is a we got through it by the skin of our teeth. We achieved, but what we achieved was the bare minimum. We have won, but the prize is only doing it all over again. Yeah, so we could go with that instruction or just like, hi, it's April, let's not talk about March. And welcome back to another video. I feel weird saying another video because you guys saw me approximately twice in March. Thank you for all your well wishes and your sending out of the search parties. I am in fact alive, but genuinely only barely. Because you see, while I did take a planned week off in March for my birthday, I did not plan to take the rest of the month off. No, the universe planned that for me. Because one of lovely spouse Harry's pupils gave him the worst virus, and we were the sickest that we have been in years. Which was about as much fun as it sounds. So I apologise if I still sound very congested and snotty, but trust me when I say it is better than the demon, the entity that I was harbouring in my lungs mere days ago. And I am hopefully free to carry on with my life as a semi-well person. Because you know, chronic illness life, y'all. We're never entirely a well person, are we? We are here now for my April TBR. If you were around for my March TBR, then you will know that I was trying to make March my best reading month ever. I had calculated from my 2023 reading spreadsheet the months where I read the most books and the most pages, and I was trying to beat both of those in March. And the first half of the month went swimmingly. First half of the month was genuine achievement, and then the second half of the month was just endlessly rewatching The Walking Dead. And to be fair, Harry and I could have been plausible extras in the new series of it. And the deep irony of this is that by the time that we have calculated my March numbers, it's probable that March is actually going to be one of my very worst reading months for 2024. And my friends, that do be the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I have not abandoned the quest to make one of the months of this year my best reading month ever. But that month will not be April, because I am going to be reserving April as a reset month. Otherwise known as we're gonna finish all of the things we started in the second half of March. And we are going to read a bunch of new stuff with absolutely zero page count pressure, without me constantly totaling up in the background how many pages I need to read that day to hit my goal for the month. April's it's just gonna be more chill. They're gonna be more relaxing. Because after the true disaster that was March, which was a month where I had to make tons of minute decisions about how I was going to take care of myself and lovely spouse Harry, I have instead delegated all of my decisions once again to my patrons by employing their little votey fingers. You guys might remember that in January of this year I had my patrons participate in a poll week where every day they answered one or two polls to pick all of my TBR books for January, and I decided to do it again for April. So for almost every square on my bingo board from hell, I have given my patrons a poll and a choice of 5 books. And just like January, I have absolutely no idea what they've picked. I released those polls into the wild and then I promptly deleted them from my consciousness. I need all of the room up here for Daddy Rick and Daryl. No, seriously, the hyperfixation has really taken hold. Please help me. So without further ado, you and I are going to see at the exact same time what the results of each of these polls are. And we're just gonna hope that my patrons' track record of being real nice to me continues through, because I need some easy wins. Okay, so just like in January, we're gonna go box by box through my bingo board from hell, which means that the first square is my 10 audiobooks square. The square that I am hands down having the least problems with in 2024. Like, I predicted this square was going to be one of my easy wins square, and oh, she was correct, because any of the reading that I did in the second half of March was all audiobooks. So for the 10 audiobooks category, I simply went through my subscription services, which now includes my library. She's a library girly these days, my friend. Libby and I are old pals at this point. And I chose 5 audiobooks that my adult brain went, yeah, that looks good. So those audiobooks were The Raven Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, True Crime Story by Joseph Knox, The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue, Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake, and What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. So those books have a nice like wide genre range all the way from fantasy to like memoir, but if I had to stake a prediction, I would say that my patrons will probably either go for the Olivia Blake or the Maggie Stiefvater, because although my book club over on Patreon is a variety book club and we choose 2 books from 2 completely different genres every 2-month period to read together, the top of all of the polls, like almost every single poll on my Patreon, ends up being a fantasy book. So without further ado, let's see the results. As predicted, my patrons have picked The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, and yeah, the Olivia Blake came in second, although True Crime Story did get fairly far up there. There is still a solid group of my patrons who are thriller lovers and who will cling on to that genre with their fingertips. So that's really cool. I am an OG Maggie Stiefvater fan back from the days of like the Werewolves of Mercy Falls series, and The Raven Boys has sat on my shelf for such a long time. So I guess the only potential problem with this one is that it is actually going to add 7 books effectively to my series tracker spreadsheet, which we just excavated in March. But the reality is that I'm never going to stop being a series reader no matter how many series I'm in the middle of, and we're just gonna all have to accept that. And when we say we, I mean me. So the Raven Boys Quartet is one of those like mythical god tier YA fantasy series, and I don't really feel like I need to give you a synopsis, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So this series is about Blue Sargent. She comes from a long line of clairvoyants, and every year on one particular day, Blue and all of the other women, I think, in her family stand and watch a procession of the soon-to-be dead walking past them. Blue herself never actually sees any of these people and doubts that she is in fact clairvoyant at all and thinks maybe she's just a dud. This year, for whatever reason, a boy walks out of the lineup and speaks directly to her, and this boy is Gansey. And I feel like saying the word Gansey out loud also kind of invokes something for a lot of people in the YA fantasy side of booktube. Gansey is a boy from a local private school which Blue has always been told to stay away from, that the boys who attend that school are nothing but trouble. But Blue is drawn to Gansey in a way that she can't possibly explain. But it turns out that Gansey isn't just a privileged private school boy, he actually has a mission all of his own that he wants Blue's help with. He and the other 3 Raven Boys. So many people that I trust who have almost identical book feelings to me absolutely love this series. Although that being said, there are a few people who have completely opposite book taste to me who love this series. Olivia, I'm looking at you. It is a joke between myself and the lovely Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe that if she loves the book, I will hate it, and vice versa. Our Venn diagram has the barest sliver in the middle of books that we both love, and this is one of Olivia's absolute favourite series, so I guarantee you she is sweating now that she knows it's on my TBR. Alright, so next up we have the read 60% of my 2024 purchases square. I will admit, and you can probably see behind me because this is not a TBR trolley, it is in fact a haul trolley. There are quite a few books on the top 2 tiers of this trolley, and they have in fact spilled over onto the top of the small bookcase over there. Because as you will eventually see from my doomed March vlog, I started out the month feeling like I was broken, like I didn't know how to buy books anymore, because every time I went to buy a book I thought about this square and I was like, but are you going to read it right now? Like, are you going to read it this year? And if the answer was maybe, then it went back on the shelf and I did not buy it. But by the end of March, after my birthday had passed and I had book tokens to spend, I had been sick and housebound for quite a long time, the buy-in just kind of blossomed. So I had a healthy selection to choose from for my read 60% of my 2024 purchases square, and you guys do have another book haul coming your way this month. So the books that I picked for this poll were Missing or My Grandmother's Secrets by Claire Wills, which is a memoir, An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson, which is a fantasy / horror, Western Lane by Chetna Maru, which is literary fiction, A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock, which is horror, and Final Verdict by Tobias Buck, which is true crime. And once again, if I was going to put in a prediction here, I would say that the horrors are probably going to be right at the top of the list. Possibly followed up by Western Lane, because my patrons do love to torture me with literary fiction sometimes. So let's see the results. Well, there's no surprise there. Zero surprise from me that the winner is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson, with the next runner-up being the other horror on this list, although I am quite surprised that the next book which was popular was the memoir. Genuinely didn't think they were going to go that route. So S.T. Gibson is of course the author of A Dowry of Blood, which you guys know that I read and absolutely loved. And A Dowry of Blood is a Dracula and the Brides of Dracula retelling, whereas An Education in Malice is a Carmilla retelling. For those of you who don't know the story of Carmilla, it is a vampire lesbian horror written in the 1870s. So it was technically written before Dracula. Dracula was the 1890s. And the original story of Carmilla is really haunting, super gothic. It's about obsession and two women's entanglement with each other and where does one end and the other one begins. But I wasn't just excited because Carmilla, I was also excited because Carmilla meets dark academia. An Education in Malice is set in St. Perpetua's College in Massachusetts. College is pretty isolated, it's in the hills there, it's in a lush landscape, it's kind of been forgotten by time. And we follow Laura Sheridan, who is starting her very first day at St. Perpetua's, and from the second that she gets in there, she enters into a serious academic rivalry with another girl, Carmilla. Think kind of like Rory in Paris if Rory didn't suck. And of course, as with all other dark academia, there is one subject which becomes the true obsession of the two of them, and in this case it is poetry and their enigmatic poetry professor De La Fontaine. The blurb of this one promises not just obsession but also dark magic and some like truths about the college that have been hidden for hundreds of years. I'm so glad that this one won the poll because I have a feeling that I'm going to pick this book up and just absolutely consume it in one bite. Now, next up we have my 10 reread square. And guys, it's now April, so this is now 4 months of the squares on this bingo board, and genuinely this is one of the coolest additions to this board, because you guys know that previous to making this bingo board I really struggled with rereads. I struggled with allowing myself to pick them up because I felt like I just needed to always be reading new things to bring you guys new content, and I honestly didn't think you were going to be interested in me rereading especially some of my favourite series. But also I just kind of always felt like I wasn't achieving anything if I wasn't picking up a new book because it didn't count for any of my goals. So making rereading a priority in 2024 has kind of like changed a little thing in my brain. Don't get me wrong, I do still have a little moment when I come to film my tops and bottoms if some of my tops have been rereads, because I'm like, oh, I don't know if you guys are going to be interested in hearing me gush about this series over again. So far you haven't seemed to mind, so thank you for being on the reread bandwagon with me. Like, allowing myself the freedom to pick up some of my favourites over again has just been so much fun. But that wasn't exactly the way that I put this poll together, because instead of just putting fun books that I would like to reread at some point on this poll, every single one of these titles in some way relates to an unfinished series. So first up we've got Saving Francesca by Melina Marchetta. Now all of the books in the Saving Francesca series are technically companion books and you don't have to read the whole series to really understand all of them. But the final book in this companion series, The Place on Dalhousie, has been absolutely haunting me on my TBR for the longest time, and I just can't seem to make myself pick it up. The next book on this is Aurora Rising by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and this is the first in the Aurora Rising series which I have not picked up the last book of. And unlike other series where I'm just like, oh, I desperately want to read all of that series again in order to get up to date with it, this series is actually a much rarer case in that I can't actually remember very much about it, because although it is Jay and Amy writing together, which is a certain kind of magic, the story itself, the actual plot of this one is really not my favourite. Next up is The Sea of Monsters, which is the second book in the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. I picked up the first book in this series out of pure nostalgia after watching the first series of the Percy Jackson adaptation. While I have read the first 5 books in the Percy Jackson series many times, I have never finished the Heroes of Olympus series, which is the one that comes after after, and now there is another book in the Percy Jackson series, but it tacks on at like the end of the timeline, and I have that on my shelves. Then there is Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor, which is the second book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which I picked up at some point last year in order to finally finish the last book of, and instead what I did was I reread the first book and got stuck halfway through the second one. And finally there is the Bone season by Samantha Shannon, which is a series that I haven't finished. I haven't read up to the last book in. However, obviously Samantha Shannon has reissued the Bone season with new material, and all of the other books in the series are being re-released in this like newly edited and revised format starting from May. And after those rewrites have all been released, the newest book in the series will be carrying on with that timeline and the new characters and the new information included in it. And so it only makes sense that if I'm going to finish that series, I should read the revised edition and read it through, and April seems like a good time to do that because the rest of them are coming out in May. This actually means that I have no idea what my patrons will have picked for this one. So let's look at the results. Oh, okay. Alright, so Percy Jackson won in that poll. If I was going to make a prediction, I would for sure have picked Laini Taylor, followed up by Samantha Shannon. I actually can't believe that Samantha Shannon only got 23% of this entire vote. That's nuts to me. That's a genuine surprise because my patrons are Samantha Shannon stans, y'all. Okay, so I guess that means that I am actually committing to rereading Percy Jackson. So that's like, what? That's a 11 book series now, of which I've read one of. So we have 10 books in my future. That's fine. That's fine. Everything's fine. I can do that. It's okay. Okay, next up we have got TBR Veterans. This is one of my least favourite squares on my bingo board because it really kind of does actually force me to look at my TBR in a different way. You guys know that in February I did an update on the like I unhauled 1/3 of my library situation and like do I regret it? And my overwhelming conclusion in that video, wherein I give you lots of stats of what my library looks like now versus what it looks like then, is no, I don't regret it in any way. However, the older books in my library now are under much stronger scrutiny because when it comes to the TBR Veterans square on this bingo board, I'm constantly forced to look at the oldest titles on there and be like, I kept you because I was absolutely 100% sure that at some point I was going to pick you up and absolutely love you, but I am still somehow not picking you up even though I have 1/3 less books to choose from in my library and I'm being so much more picky with books that come in. Like even though I had an influx of books in March, they're all books I had carefully considered. So now I'm looking at my TBR Veterans that I'm repeatedly skimming over on the shelf and going, why are they still there then? So the books that I put on this particular poll were The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook, Bunny by Mona Awad, A Crooked Tree by Una Mannion, Threadneedle by Carrie Thomas, and then finally there is Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. So I think my prediction for this one is Threadneedle because it's the most like straight up fantasy out of all of these books. So let's have a look at the results. Oh, okay. So overwhelmingly, I was wrong. The winner with 43% of the vote is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. And also looking at the comments on this post, it looks like quite a few of my patrons actually really enjoyed this book and gave it 5 stars. It is about a woman who is commissioned to go and paint a mural on an old lighthouse on a remote Scottish island. And this is going to be a really long-term project that's going to take her many years. So she decides to actually relocate herself and her young daughters to the island with the whole sort of idea of getting away from the mainland and everything that has happened in her past and just starting again. But very quickly after getting to the island, 2 of her daughters go missing, and in her frantic search for them, the islanders tell her that the cave underneath the lighthouse used to be a prison for women accused of witchcraft. Then the timeline switches to 20 odd years later when one of the sisters, I think the one remaining sister, is looking for her 2 sisters and her mother who went missing all those years ago, and then she receives a mystery phone call about her youngest sister Clover, that there has actually been a sighting of her on the island. Not gonna lie, I am now more excited to pick up this book after I have gone back and reread the synopsis and reminded myself what this book was about, because it's one of those books that has sat there for so long on my shelves that I was like, yeah, I vaguely kind of know what it's about, but I'm not really excited about it anymore. Next up is my random emoji pick. Now in January, when I gave my patrons this category to choose from, I used a random emoji generator to decide what was going into the poll, and I've done it again for this time, so I do know the emojis that we have to choose from, and I filmed the choosing of them for you guys, so here they are. Now guys, is it me, or does this particular set of emojis kind of tell a kind of gruesome thriller story all on its own? Like, this could be the plot for a thriller right here. So let's see what my patrons picked for this one. Oh, just winning with 34% of the vote, we have got the lock and key emoji. Don't even have to hesitate to decide what I'm going to choose for this one. I did have books in mind for some of these, but the book for this one has just, it's been flirting with me, guys. We've almost been friends quite a few times. The book that I am going to pick for this one is The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly, which is actually quite amusing because it is sort of a thriller. It's like a gothic thriller. So this one is all about a man who many years ago wrote a mystery book, and in this mystery book there were a bunch of different clues which would inevitably finally lead to a fortune at the end of it, and the fortune is real. However, the author of this book could not have predicted the impact on his family, because in pursuit of this fortune people have done some truly horrible things, including at one point breaking into his home, really horrifically terrifying his daughter, who now suffers from agoraphobia and hasn't left the family home since. However, all these years later, it is now the anniversary of the book, and a documentary crew are now interested in filming the family and interviewing them about all of the things that have happened to them, because the book is being reissued along with a new treasure hunt. I'm very excited for this one. I did read He Said, She Said by Erin Kelly years ago when it came out, and I wasn't the hugest fan, but it seems like her style and her focus for her books has really changed since that one, so I am very excited to see what this one brings. Okay, so next up is my 10 series tracker books, and I say because every time I do an update on my series tracker, I just have all of the different series swirling about in the back of my brain, vying for priority, and every single time I look at the spreadsheet, like every time I open it and stare at it again, I decide that some other book is the priority. And actually I'm finding that this is one of my biggest issues in getting books off of my series tracker, is the decisiveness. So for this poll, what I did was I went through and I looked at the 5 easiest wins as far as I'm concerned for getting books off of my series tracker. So the first one of those is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherworld by Heather Fawcett, The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri, then there is The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake, then there is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, and then finally the last book on this poll, and what would be my prediction for the winner, is The Vanishing of Aveline Jones by Phil Hicks. So let's see the results together. No! It is a tie! You guys are supposed to pick for me. Okay, so this poll is tied between Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherworld and Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I think the reason that my patrons have done this is because both of these would mean the completion of a series off of my list with only one book. Oh, so I think they were trying to be helpful and nice and not shady, but okay, I think in good conscience I'm gonna have to choose Hellbent, because like I said guys, it's only April and I've talked about this book so much that I'm sick of hearing it from myself. Okay, so next up we have the non-fiction poll, and this one I am so excited about. For some reason, and I don't know about you guys, but for some reason for me, what happens with my buying, and I've definitely noticed trends in it over the last couple of years, is that I'll get really into one genre for quite a long time, and I'll buy that genre of book pretty consistently, and then I'll read something and I'll be like, ooh, now I'm really in the mood for this genre, and then I'll buy a bunch of that genre, and it just keeps going like that throughout the year. And right now what I've really been in the mood for is non-fiction. I have bought predominantly non-fiction so far in 2024. So the first one on here is We Keep the Dead Close by Becky Cooper. This is a true crime. Next up there's Cloistered by Catherine Coldstream, and this one is an unusual memoir. Next up there's Prostitute Laundry by Charlotte Shane, which is a collection of letters that she sent an anonymous mailing list during her time as a sex worker. Next up there is Storm Pegs by Jen Hadfield, which is a memoir about a woman who moved to Shetland. And then finally there is The Chain by Chimene Suleiman, which is half memoir, half sort of like feminist sociological exploration of the way that women are tricked by society and by men countless different ways into performing certain roles. To be honest, I don't really have any predictions, like no predictions whatsoever for what my patrons are going to pick from my non-fiction selections, because every time I've ever given them non-fiction to choose from, they have picked the most random one from the poll, like the one that I thought was going to be least popular, so I know no matter what I pick I'm going to be dead wrong here. So let's look at the results. Oh, okay, so it is Prostitute Laundry by Charlotte Shane. This one was kindly sent to me by the publishers in March, so it is a brand new one through my door, and it will also nicely hit my 60% of 2024 purchases square. And then skipping over the BFF controls square, because I actually have a full list to choose from the wonderful Kirsty for this one, which I will mood choose for during the month to give me the illusion of some sort of choice. We land on the very last poll for my TBR, and that is my 10 rainy day reads. Now, I would genuinely say that my 10 rainy day reads are my second most hated square on this bingo board. Again, it is absolutely forcing me to pick up the books that I know were an issue for me. The TBR Veterans and the 10 Rainy Day Squares are both there to try and tackle problems that I found with my reading, and while it is certainly doing that and it is certainly working, it is also making me really angry at myself. So for this poll, first up we have Nemesis, which is the penultimate novel in the Miss Marple series by Agatha Christie. There is one more after this, and then there is a collection of short stories that kind of finishes out all of the Marple stuff, and we all know how little I want to finish this series. Like, the idea of having no new Miss Marple books to ever read makes me tremendously sad. And I don't know why I'm like this, guys, because it's not that I didn't know when I started reading Agatha Christie books when I was like 12 that Agatha Christie is, as we say in Scotland, pan-breed. She is dead. She is long gone. She is never going to be bringing out any new books in my lifetime. I do desperately want to finish this series this year because I want the accomplishment of having done it, and of course I want to have read all of the Marple books because she is one of my favourite characters in the world. We have got In Ascension by Martin McInnes. Ironically, we have Agatha Christie by Lucy Worsley. There's Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman, and then finally there is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. So let's see the winner of the poll together. Okay, alright, with 45% of the vote, my patrons would really love me to stop talking about reading this series. Alright guys, I heard you. I'ma do that. I'ma finish the series, because the likelihood is that if I pick up Nemesis in April, I'm probably going to end up picking up Sleeping Murder and then the like short story collection after it, because they're all quite slim and that would just get the pain over in one go, and I'd be worried that if I didn't do that I would then just procrastinate the next book. So I guess April is the month that I finish the Miss Marple series. Okay, so those were all of the books that my patrons selected for me from my bingo board from hell for 2024. That does not mean that those are the only books that I am going to be attempting to read in April, because I already have a couple of books that I need to finish that I carried over. The first of those is Dark Age by Pierce Brown. This is the 5th book in the Red Rising series. Allow me to show you what my face looked like when I hit the quarter mark of this book. Dark Age do be dark. So this book is going to continue to destroy me, and I'm sure that Becca is going to continue to enjoy the crying selfies as I hit the horrible things all the way throughout this book. And then I have to finish The Final Strife by Sarah El-Arifi, which is the second pick for my Seance Society book club over on Patreon. I DNF'd the other one for March, April, and I need this one to be a win, you guys. Also for the Seance Society book club, we are currently working our way through the Diviners series by Libba Bray. So I need to finish Layer of Dreams because again, I picked that up in March and I just couldn't finish it. So I'm going to be finishing Layer of Dreams, but then I'm also going to be going on to Before the Devil Breaks You because that is the book for this month. That's the April selection. We're doing a book a month in this series. And Before the Devil Breaks You is the first book in the series that I have not read before. I've read the first two, so I have never completed it. I'm going to finish the last two books with the book club. That's going to be so much fun. And then of course, April is the month of Royal Assassin for the Fits Along. In case you are new here and you haven't heard about it before, I am hosting a complete read along of all of the Realm of the Elderlings books by Robin Hobb. In January and February we read Assassin's Apprentice, and then in March, April we are reading Royal Assassin, and this is why we are reading these books one every 2 months, because some of them are huge and life happens. This one was originally on my TBR for March and there's just no way. There's no way that I would have been able to read it, and so I would have fallen behind. So the readathon does have a nice buffer for all of us built in, even though all of us are like, as soon as you finish one book you want to just pick up the next one. And then finally I have the 2 books for this month for Around the Disc in 800 Days. Again, if you're new here, Around the Disc in 800 Days is a complete read along of the Discworld novels hosted by myself and my lovely friend Kirsty from Melbs Reads over on Instagram. I will of course link everybody that I talk about down below in the description box. And interestingly enough, this gives us a good place for you to jump in if you have been watching me do this read along for 1.5 years now and you have wanted to join in but you didn't want to, you know, jump in the middle or pick up random books. The Discworld can of course be read out of order in lots of little subgenres. I do have a video about that. I will link that also down below, but one of the nicest places to start in the Discworld is the Tiffany Aching books, so you could just join in with us. Isn't that nice? So that is it, guys. Those are all of the books that I am planning on picking up in April. Obviously I do keep note of how many pages and books I have read in a month on my reading tracker anyway, so you never know. One of these months might just accidentally end up being my best reading month of all time. Could it be April? Maybe, but I'm not going to put any pressure on myself to do it. I am going to try to just relax and enjoy everything that I'm reading this month. And to be fair, some of the books that have ended up on this list are very gentle books, like the Percy Jackson ones, so I'm really hopeful that I'm gonna have just a cozy April. Well, I say cozy, but April's weather surely does not know what it's doing. I feel like I update you every video on my weather and it's just such a Scottish thing to do. I'm making my ancestors proud right now. So on that note, if you have got this far through the video, leave me the umbrella emoji down below with or without the rain. And as always, if you have read any of the books that I've talked about here today and you would like to tell me whether you loved or hate them, then please leave that in the comments down below, and I would like to know what book you are planning on reading for April that is your most exciting book. What is the book that has you absolutely pumped to read this month? Tell me about that down below too. If you are new here and you would like to see how I got on with these books in April, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you are a returning viewer, one of the people who sent out a search party for me when I was MIA in March, and I appreciate you so much, please hit that like button on the way out because it really does help my channel. And I will see all of you guys, I promise, very soon. Bye!